Edge of Chaos, starring Neurotoxin and Joe Ryan. Edge of Chaos is a free-flowing discussion occasionally dealing with mature topics.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Edge of Chaos. I am Joe Ryan here with Neurotoxin.
Hello.
And today we want to address the topic of hysteria, but we want to do that by first addressing the Ebola outbreak crisis.
Ooh, Ebola's
boogie.
To get you.
we have a different topic where similar misinformation and hysteria gets bandied about like fact later on, and I think you all can guess by watching the news what the other big thing news was. But boy, CNN they want 12 monkeys to happen, don't they? CNN's just, oh my god, a guy might have it in New York. He was vomiting and had diarrhea. Did he eat in New York?
He had a pizza on the Broadway.
So he just picked one of the thousands of restaurants at random and had some bad Chinese? This is uncommon in New York? Really? And they're quarantining the guy in the hospital, and it's coast-to-coast news, and it's like, you know, obviously we know the media they want a story, but isn't this when you're now, like, stoking fears of a pandemic? Isn't that crossing even another moral line that it really shouldn't be crossing?
You really don't think they have any more moral lines they can cross, and then this happens, right?
I guess we are if you watch John Oliver at all, we're in the realm now of print journalism basically just being sold out completely to advertisers now to get online revenue, so nothing should shock me anymore, but yeah, and I mean, I think there's a nugget of concern, I guess, in some, and we'll get to that. But not never, but boy, this is being exploited 8 ways from Sunday by our media. And even so you have the liberal version of it, just hysteria baiting and reporting every even hint or shadow of someone overreacting as abject fact.
Homeless guy in New York took a shit in the street. He must have diarrhea.
And it was bloody a little, and now it's Ebola, right? Yeah.
Come on.
I'm sorry for that image, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
Really?
But yeah, and it's like, yeah, and it's that hammer and nail thing. They're just looking and seeing shadows now at this point, and they're reporting on every single one. I mean, this is the network where it's an internet meme now to report on their reporters in the field going, oh my god, we heard, yes, an explosion, yes, what was that? Oh, it was a trash truck. Oh, right, okay. Like, have you ever seen them out on the street for any kind of a story? The comedy shows run their reporters just literally yelling things that are happening in front of them as if they're part of the story.
Well, I've wanted to do a show for a while on mediocrity, which is our own kind of proprietary term here, if you pay attention to our Facebook feed or look at our blog. And mediocrity is basically, it's mediocrity in media, trying very hard to appeal to the lowest common denominator to get the most ratings. And I think kind of the background for this is that we went through a period, and I want to remind Americans, and I want to remind our listeners, this is not always how it has been. But probably starting in the 30s with national radio, I would say, maybe even a little bit earlier than that with national newspapers, national print. And going through maybe about 10 years ago, you really had a very strong oligopoly on media. You had, first it was the papers, then it was the radio, then it was television.
William Randolph Hearst, yellow journalism, all that stuff,
right.
Yeah.
You have a very, very small, that was one of the first ones. You have a very small oligopoly that owns most of the news channels. Now, of course, compared to Putin and RT and RIA News in Russia, that we've got, very competitive and free market media here, but we won't go there quite yet.
And I guess I mean national media, because there was always local media, but as far as national, yeah. The oligopoly is still there, only now it's way fewer of them.
Right, but here's the thing. So here's the thing. That national media is so powerful, it's so rich, and a lot of the local media are their affiliates. They're not really independent. So we really went through a period, and I think we really hit the height of this in the 90s, where you could only really get your news from one of the top 5 or 6 conglomerates. It was really, you had to go to pains to find anything else. Now, were they different from each other a little bit? Fox News, NBC, CNN, not all the same. But it's basically take your pick. It's like, hey, kids, we've got a wide menu of what we're having for dinner today. We can have McDonald's. We can have Burger King. We can have Carl's Jr. Yeah. We can have Jack in the Box. Or we could really go out on a limb and have Wiener Schnitzel, because that's foreign food.
It's like, as Lewis Black would put it, it's just the different bowls of shit. The only difference being the smell. So,
right. And then you have like
it's all fast food shit. Just different. What's your fast food shit preference today?
And then you have like the 12-year-old, health conscious daughter saying, "Dad, what about some health food? What are you, a communist?" That's what our national media looks like. It looks like it was disgusting. We complained about it back then when we were a lot younger in high school. This is so stupid. But the thing is, because of their reach, because they had network television and because they basically affiliated all the local media and all the local newspapers, it was very difficult for anyone to come out with anything else. Now, we have this thing called the internet. And we have social media, not just internet. We have Twitter, Facebook, Google+. These things are actually adequately competing with the national media. They're competing with these conglomerates. If you look at their profit margins, you look at their popularity. I'm not saying they're not still the most popular, but just quantitative comparison from now to 2004, you will see how far they've dropped in their credibility, in their ratings.
Well, not to mention you have internet-only media being a thing in its own way. Now you have like things like First Look, which is what Glenn Greenwald went to join, and Matt Taibbi.
Right.
Actually, they're attracting big names. An idea that they're just bringing up something that's wholly an internet publication, and these really well-known people that were getting well paid by print publications like Rolling Stone or whatever, Guardian. Now they're going, so it's
Well, not to
the migration
mention,
it's become a little more democratized, I think.
Right, a little more competitive, I'd say,
right.
So than democratized. Not only that, but now, of course, foreign media is a lot easier to access. For example, a lot of stuff in the UK and BBC. I remember when I was in college, 2001, 2002, even though there was the internet, it wasn't strong enough that you could just go look up BBC stuff on the web.
Now you can stream it.
So, right, my friends in college that were very liberal and that thought all the U.S. media is all just conservative lapdogs, which is not, I don't believe that, but that's what they thought. They would listen to BBC, using the radio and using satellite radio with all the static because they got quote-unquote real news. Now, BBC is corrupt as shit too. It's just differently corrupt, but that's a different story.
It's just a different it's a different corrupted opinion they never heard.
But the point
but things like Al Jazeera being like one of the big ones that I hear people they used
and
to
that
stream.
one's not corrupt at all.
Al Jazeera
Come on.
Well, I think that it's a discussion that I had with actually someone who started out as a troll on our Facebook feed. He was railing against RT when you had said basically that they're completely controlled by the Russian government. It's a bunch of bullshit. It's their propaganda arm. It is. And that's demonstrably true. Everyone knows about it. But you get to people that are so disillusioned by our media being full of shit that they turn to a different media that's full of shit in a different way, but in opposition to the media they hate. So they just believe it because it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend's disease. But it is interesting. For me, I always balance the different propagandas against each other, and somewhere in the middle you find truth. But anyway, that's...
And I feel like this is a good thing. Honestly, this effect is a net positive because you have more competition. And in my opinion, competition is what breeds progress, not cooperation, not the lowest common denominator. People competing because it stimulates them to do better. Because all it takes is if you have, 7 or 8 even conglomerates, but you have way more than that now. All it takes is one of them saying, fuck this, I'm going to report the real news, I'm going to tell the truth, and they're going to leave the other 7 in the dust. So then they're forced, it basically puts more competitive pressures on them to be more accurate in their reporting. However, the backdrop that Joe is referring to, and I agree with him completely, is that these mega media clowns with CNN, NBC, Fox News are the worst 3, I would say, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They're used to competing in a different way. They're used to appealing to the lowest common denominator and only worrying about competition from each other. So now they're at a complete loss for what to... It's like, where's the lowest country? No matter how far we go, no matter how far down we go, we can't find it.
Being steeped in battle to these two is like when Burger King and McDonald's are dueling with their Big King and their Big Mac. Right?
Which one will kill you
We'll put
faster?
ours on sale this week, and that'll fuck with you, but then you put yours on sale next week, and that fucks with me, and then back and forth.
The person
meanwhile, everyone's getting fat.
Right. The first person, the company to kill more people from high cholesterol and blood pressure wins. Is that?
I guess.
But that's what this is.
We'll kill more of your customers, see. They got duped by our special. We'll kill them with our food, and then they can't go to your restaurant.
It's like tobacco companies in the 80s, right? That's what it's turning into. It's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad. So
CNN's a different animal, by the way. Jeff Zucker is just determined to kill them like he killed NBC. But anyhow, he wants to turn them into an entertainment company Hence why their reporting now is done by idiots with a cell phone on frickin'
Wait.
Instagram.
So you're saying they ever had a purpose other than entertainment? Because wow,
This is the network with Wolf Blitzer. Yes, this is Wolf Blitzer. We go live right now to Israel, where the shelling is continuing and Hamas is in talks of ceasefire with Israel. And to our reporter on the ground, what's going on there? We hear that there's lots of that's your reporting.
Lots of explosions.
That's your reporting on
Really?
CNN.
There's
Yes,
lots
Wolf. There are explosions and bombs, loud noises. Things are happening. Stomach churning. They're just saying things that they're hearing. They're not even giving you information.
It's just okay, but
anyway,
it's just that Kyle.
I like dumping on CNN.
Right? No, I'm with you 100%. And here's the thing, Kyle Lazen, you know who that is, right? He's the guy who wrote Culture Jam, and he launched a lot of the Occupy movement. I'm not necessarily a big fan of him, but one thing he's a journalist. He's a much better journalist than he is any kind of civil rights leader. I'll tell you that. He's kind of a nut. But he's written about this, about how, he's actually cited sociological research on this, how people, when they're looking at reporting, when they're looking at whether it's entertainment or they're looking at news, we really don't have there's really no distinction anymore between news and entertainment.
No. And the movie Network talked about this, and that was back in the 70s, I think, wasn't it? So.
And he talks about, he actually cites studies in Culture Jam about how people look to be jolted. They look to be excited. They look to be stimulated. Especially you're coming home from work, you're tired, you're burned out on being serious. You don't want to sit there and watch news, read news that you actually have to process and think about what is this thing this means.
It's like George Costanza telling Jerry that he wants comedy, he doesn't have to think about too much. Just people saying the word puke, he just wants to laugh at it and not think about it at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he talks about this. He talks about shows like America's Funniest Home Videos back in the day.
Oh
or
my
now it's AFP,
God.
which is the same thing. And
gotta be one of the worst shows ever made in history.
Bob
Which
Saget.
the modern hipster idiot YouTube fan equivalent of that is Tosh.0, by the way. Every time that show comes on, it's like I have to run for the remote. It's hysterical behavior on my part. Get this off my fucking TV right now.
You just feel like polluting your brain.
I feel my IQ just dying. The brain cells are withering in there. But anyway.
Being serious for a second, though, and I am with you 100%. That show, he talked about how they specifically cue you to laugh. Like when something happens,
they had a laugh track.
Yeah, it's mostly someone getting hit in the balls. Is
what
you laugh at. That's half the jokes.
A lot of times when that happened, they'd have a sound effect too. Remember that?
Bing! Right.
Bing! Like a bell in a boxing ring.
And then the laugh track. Right.
And then Bob Saget would come and tell some horrendous joke that no one would laugh at, and they'd go to another video. Anyway, sorry, I watched too much TV when I was a kid. I'm
with you, though. This is more when you're
so I feel like I could comment on this.
Absolutely. Yeah, Joe is definitely the resident expert.
Yeah, I was raised on American TV. I feel like I could comment on this stuff pretty authoritatively.
So now with news, we're really getting the same effect, where it's just boom, explosions, bombs, stomach virus, pain, death, and people see this shit. They're not paying attention. They're not listening. If you talk to someone, if you ever stopping by McDonald's, and there's McDonald's again, right? On your way from work or whatever, wherever it is that there's a TV available, and you're listening to people. And if you actually try to engage a person in conversation about what they just heard, it's like in 6th grade, okay, kids, we're going to turn this off now and ask the class what just happened. You're going to find most people have no fucking idea what the news was. They just heard a bunch of big explosions. They're like, oh my God, that's so scary. And
your tendency is to think of it as like it's happening right in your own town, too. And they know that.
In their own backyard. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So the scary part is we're stimulating them to be scared. We're stimulating neurotransmitters. They're very much operating out of the lower brain. And then we're letting their cortex come up with their own version of what happened. Mm-hmm. Okay? This is, I have a degree in psychology, and I can tell you this is how you basically manipulate people to believe what you want them to believe. This is how you manipulate people to be just fear and hysteria driven, as opposed to thinking for themselves. And that's what's happening. And again, I don't think this is a conspiracy that anyone's doing this on purpose. I think this is an unfortunate effect of these dying news conglomerates just trying desperately to keep people's attention.
It's an easy way to, keep people's eyes glued to the screen. Yeah, that's all they want.
And their ears, more so even than their eyes. So it's really what you're hearing, whether it's Ebola, and thank you, Joe, for giving away what our topic is today. You've been wanting to do that since we started recording.
Spoiler
I can
alert.
see that, right? Whether it's Ebola, whether it's the crisis in the Middle East, no one even really wants to talk about it.
It just seems like people want to scream about it, if anything. I was at least speaking about the Israel thing, but The Ebola
Even
thing, people
Ebola.
just want to come up with their own crazy theories, and I have one of my own that I actually came up with just to show you how easy this is to do.
Okay, I want to hear this.
What?
I've got my...
Well, this is based on a report I thought I heard, and actually it turns
popcorn
out I must have heard a different thing about this. But let's just say that and a person who didn't know, and this has actually happened in Saudi Arabia now, and I think in Nigeria, where people visited these areas and just to kind of detour for half a second, where the current Ebola outbreak is happening most of all. It's Sierra Leone, it's Guinea, and it is Liberia.
And Cameroon is the fourth one.
Oh, Cameroon too? Okay,
Yes.
so Western Africa, basically. And incidentally, boys and girls, does anyone know the history of the country of Liberia? Does anyone know that we had a West African colony called Liberia? The capital is Monrovia. Can we figure out why that might be?
Which president might have started that, right?
Yeah, well, there were a few that supported it, and basically the idea was they took, there was the American Colonization Society, they started the colony with slaves, that basically the idea of emancipation but repatriation. The idea of like, well, life will suck there for them, there's still slavery. But it was like they're taking that idea of send them back to Africa, they're running with it, basically.
Well, actually, I think that's what launched it. And then in the maybe 1950s, one of the counter movements to the civil rights movement that basically did not want, the civil rights movement did not want integration, was basically that same idea, let's repatriate the African Americans to Africa. Now, this had at that point it had no.
Wouldn't it
there
be
wasn't
better for
anywhere
you
to send them?
if it's so horrible for you here? Shouldn't you just go back to where you come from?
Well,
Yeah, it's
how about you remove the Jim Crow laws? Take
good old
the
American
KKK
values.
hood?
Yeah,
Maybe it won't be so bad for me here, but in any case.
well, that would involve us doing something. But anyway, yeah. But ask yourself why that flag looks like the American flag. That's why. But anyhow.
So okay. So in any case,
this is a place that's had its ups and downs, just like any African country. But the outbreak is going on there now. Let's just say that someone in America visited these places, even if they weren't a doctor helping cure Ebola, which these couple of doctors that got sick and got returned, that's what happened to them.
And they were missionaries, interestingly enough.
Well, one was working with Doctors Without Borders, trying to help contain this outbreak, which is
right.
going
That's
on.
that's not a missionary. Let me back up. They're working for NGOs, nonprofits.
Right.
Some of them are religious, some not, but still, they're all basically they're doing charity work.
But let's just say somebody came back from that area. Now they're showing symptoms, and then it turns out they have Ebola, and once they have Ebola, like let's get to that too. In America, it's fairly easy to control that. All you really have to do is isolate them, and given the main danger is, okay, who do they come in contact with between then and the time you find out, and when you isolate them. But once they're isolated, there's no cure. You literally just give them fluids and support their symptoms until their body fights off the infection.
So,
but let's just say in that time they come in contact with somebody like me, somebody in San Diego. Let's say they worked in my office. Now, we're already a few, really huge, giant pools of odds deep here, admittedly. But it's possible that, let's say I'm working on somebody's computer at my job, were just in Sierra Leone, or they have a friend that just was, and somehow the virus was communicated between them.
They fucked, yeah.
Naturally. But, in our world, because it's so linked and everyone can travel to different places so quickly, at least in the first world, we can go back and forth in places like Sierra Leone all the time. It's easy to have, what you think of as maybe a 12 Monkeys scenario that CNN just wants to happen, where all of a sudden it's just this person takes it back to their country, that person back to their country, all of a sudden you've got pandemics all across the globe. But the thing specifically with Ebola is it doesn't work that way. It's not airborne.
Ebola is not conducive to this.
Its
I'm not
bodily
saying this
fluids
can't
have to be swabbed.
Right. This
So
is
fucking
not...
would be one.
Right. So here's the thing.
It's pretty intimate contact, in other words.
Our fans don't necessarily know this about me, but I've worked in medical social work for a long time, and I understand kind of public health and infection control. And I can tell you, Ebola is not the virus that's going to happen with, not just in the U.S., but really anywhere in the West. The U.S., the U.K., Australia, Europe. It affects places that have very poor sanitation.
And no infrastructure to care for these people.
Well, sanitation infrastructure is really what I mean. So Ebola, as Joe said accurately, it's not airborne. It's also not waterborne. Those two things are important. So you think about the flu, for example, is an airborne virus. So if I cough on you or sneeze on you,
the flu,
you will get it. However, if you sneeze on someone and you have Ebola, you're actually safe. Because Ebola dies flying through the air.
Right, it doesn't live in the air long enough,
right.
or on surfaces. It lives on surfaces, but not in the air.
Right. Even in surfaces, it doesn't do all that well because it's not waterborne. You literally have to swap body fluids. Now, HIV, for example, there's only a few body fluids, and they're more or less all sexually transmitted. Ebola is a little stronger because it can live in saliva and snot, things that HIV does not live in.
Right.
So there are ways to spread it. For example, its spread is a little similar to hepatitis B. It's more a lot of people who get hepatitis B, and this is why there's mandatory vaccinations for this class, is people who work in healthcare, because you're working with a lot of body fluids. So when you hear about doctors getting sick, that's not a coincidence. It makes complete sense, yeah. Right? They come in contact with this. So first of all, someone sneezes on you on a bus or train, and you're going to start screaming Ebola. Don't. You're just seeking attention. You're not going to get Ebola. Just stop and go about your day. Okay? But
yeah.
Now, the reason this is happening, the reason this is going on where it is, and we've mentioned this on the show before, but I definitely want to go there again because this is one of those things that for both of us just irritates the shit out of us, and the ignorance around it irritates us even more. So one thing about West Africa, specifically Nigeria, which is a country Ebola is now coming into, and it's such a clusterfuck that we wouldn't even know if they're having an outbreak until they're really having an outbreak. Mm-hmm. So Lagos, Nigeria, is a city, the capital of Nigeria, of 18 million people. And that's just the ones we know about. That's just the ones that are there legally and documented. We have no idea how many people are really there. And their population density, ready for this? 52,000 per square mile.
That's a lot.
That's, they're basically sitting on top of each other. So it's kind of like, we had our last show and we talked about Honduras, where a private corporation came in and essentially owned half the country and built barracks for people to live in, at least seasonally, and no sanitation, no development, no infrastructure, no healthcare, no sanitation for food. Just here, you're going to live here and you're going to work for us, but we're going to give you lots and lots of money.
Yeah, in the Honduran case, it was United Fruit. Does anyone know for 5 points who it is in Nigeria? Anyone? Royal Dutch Shell.
Gee, there's a couple. There's BP is in there too. So it's a lot of.
But I've heard that basically Royal Dutch Shell owns most of that country.
So it's a lot of European oil companies because Nigeria is a major exporter of oil. Now, Nigeria, here's another interesting fact about Nigeria. That population of Nigeria in, I want to say 2000 or 2001, was about 90 million people. The population of Nigeria today is about 180 million people. Now it's actually in the top 6 largest countries in the world. That, people, is a ticking time bomb.
180 million?
180 million, Joe.
That is a lot of people.
You don't think of Nigeria as being up there, but that's
like over a third of the population of the U.S. That's a lot of people.
Half. It's about half the population of the U.S. More than half.
Well, actually, that is half.
It's more than half.
Wow.
325 here last Nigeria, 315. I mean, that's bigger. It's bigger than Russia. It's almost getting up there to compete with Brazil at this point. I mean, you have the biggest countries in the world.
And when you look at the problems they're having with their haves and have-nots.
Oh, yes! So obviously you have China and India. They're 2 largest countries in the world. No one's going to catch up with them. Then the third is the U.S. The fourth, people never get this right, is Indonesia, which is, it's a weird place, but that's... And then pretty much tied for 5th, you've got now Brazil and Nigeria. And people hear Nigeria like, really? An African country? Well, this is what's going on. You give people, you take this country, which is just literally stuck in the 18th century. I mean, you travel 10 miles outside of Lagos, and you've got outhouses. You've got wells. Oh, yeah, or just people shitting out in the boonies. I mean, this
is not like racist America talk. I mean, seriously, if you watch documentaries where they go into these, inner places, it's not like Shell has had this idea of building actual cities out there.
Who needs that?
A little more than encampments.
Who's got time for that?
It's enough room for the machinery, and that's about it. But you see people go by on these handmade boats made out of the local trees. I mean, that's the kind of place it is.
Hey, no, this has nothing to do with race. It has to do with the location. And I mean, Nigeria is one of the places where Boko Haram is running loose. Why do you think that is? These are the same countries that are being terrorized by Boko Haram. I mean, the second guy, the vice prime minister of Sierra Leone, just had his wife kidnapped by Boko Haram. I mean, that's how out of control these guys are because of the lack of infrastructure and a lack of development. Now, I don't want anyone to think that we're ragging on undeveloped countries, because places that are very undeveloped can still very well be cultured and very well have social control and not have rampant crime and not have rampant pandemics. This happens when the development is too fast and it's lopsided and it's done from outside. Some foreign corporation comes in. They don't care about building sanitation. They don't care about building hospitals. They don't care about running water.
They say they do, but
who's got
those attack
time
the
for
profit
that?
margin. Yeah, that's valuable oil extracting time being wasted.
Why would you?
Why do you need a nice house? You're not sleeping. You're working in the oil well.
There you go. Yes. No. Why do you need
seriously.
a school for your children? They're
They're
working
working
and
the
they're
oil well.
with you. Yes, they make more money.
There was another story I saw where like these oil pirates who don't or aren't workers, they steal the oil from the well and then they refine it themselves. You want to be scared shitless on something you see on TV. Watch these people who work in these like backwood refineries, like burning oil with a blowtorch to get gasoline that they didn't sell
that's
by
gotta
the
be great
bottle
for
on
your
the
lungs.
street.
That's really great for your lungs.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Literally, the air is flammable when you walk up to these places.
Right. So,
but well, here's the problem, and so we're not ragging on them being undeveloped backwoods. Oh, they're just savages, like Americans used to do for Native Americans here. It was a poor area that a rich company saw to exploit, and they had absolutely no vested interest in developing it or pushing it forward and modernizing it. They want them to stay poor and ignorant of their circumstance. And
I won't even go so far as to say they intentionally want the country to stay poor.
It's
They
in
just
their
have
interest.
no interest in developing it. They do just enough. They provide them barracks to live in, a pot to shit in, and
Literally.
here's lots and lots of foreign money, which you can now buy things with. There's nothing to buy. It doesn't matter. You can buy things. You can buy a bunch of cheap crap
a
coming
lot of
from
times, what
Southern
they're
Europe.
actually paying, when you look at it on a scale of what workers usually get paid, it's shit. But
Well,
anyway,
by Nigerian standards, they're making lots of money. The problem is they're uneducated, and there's really nothing to buy that's worthwhile. They're buying, like I said, they're buying a bunch of crap, a bunch of consumer products that are coming from Italy, Spain, Greece, the countries that are right there on the other side of the Mediterranean Sea, Portugal, which of course makes the EU support this because, hey, we have a place to dump all these products from all these countries whose economies are falling apart. So this works out. There's a reason for this. This is a very short-term investment. And the effects on this country are just insane because, I've actually seen some documentaries on Nigeria, and Nigeria has absolutely the worst slums in the world. Which, when you listen to what we're talking about, plus the doubling of the population in 15 years, kind of tends to happen.
it's just giant cement slab buildings with 15 people in a room and no bathroom. Do the math.
Yeah, well, the bathroom's in the corner. That's where you take a shit. And that's where the Ebola wants to be.
Yeah.
If I were an Ebola virus, that'd be where I'd want to go.
That's a tropical island to a human. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So that's kind of where we're going with this. And I've actually read that an American that traveled to Nigeria, traveled to Lagos, for what it's worth, I don't know how accurate this is, died of Ebola. There's been a documented case of someone bringing Ebola to Lagos, Nigeria. Now that's a place where this is a virus that I believe could spread. Because again, you're talking about rapid urbanization because of this kind of half-assed development, lopsided development, overcrowding.
No sanitation.
Now, the other big thing, and actually this has been mentioned by a couple of celebrity doctors that have talked about it and written reports on it. One thing these foreign corporations have built in Nigeria and even in these other places is transportation. They've built railroads, they've built canals to transport all their oil.
The oil,
and their
yeah.
And of course, and again, of course, United Fruit. Back in the day, and there you go. There's the answer. Did the same thing in Honduras. They did develop their transportation infrastructure. So now someone's got Ebola. They can bring it back to their home village where their kids are before they keel over from it.
Wow.
Wonderful. And they've never heard of Ebola in that village. So they have no idea, oh, you've got a fever, you're bleeding, let's lay you down where all the other sick kids are. Okay.
God.
So this is where it's the clash between undevelopment and development, really, that these viruses just thrive on. If you look at, now there's obviously, I'm not advocating for pre-industrial medicine, but a lot of pre-industrial medicine, if you read like old quote-unquote medical books, it's all about isolation.
Right.
Well, if someone has a virus and you have no idea what the fuck to do with it, it makes sense to isolate that person. You isolate them so they don't infect anyone else. They either live or die, but at least everyone else doesn't die. Now you have these places, Nigeria, Liberia, Cameroon, where isolation is no longer possible because it's too crowded. And you absolutely don't have modern medicine and modern sanitation to beat the virus. Like I said, tropical island to a... Joe said, tropical island to a human.
What are you going to do? Put them in the next room with 15 other people in it? I mean,
yeah, you got a virus. Go over there. Go in the other room. We don't want you here. I mean,
sit in the shit corner. Okay, yeah, what are you going to do? It's a mess. But, CNN wants this to be an American problem. It's a third world problem. And it is a problem, as Toxin just pointed out, but... Americans, let's keep our heads here. I mean, we're sort of like hijacking this, and once again, America tends to want to make every issue its issue, doesn't it? That's one thing I'm complaining here about foreigners. Everything is not about America. It's not all about you, assholes. It's like, well, when are we going to start keeling over from it? It's like, you're not. Okay, you have things called hospitals. And sanitation and doctors.
We are kind of sanitation crazed in this country to begin with.
Just a bit, just a bit.
We have, sanitizer and hand washing, and we have health codes that say employees have to wash their hands after taking a dump. Now, do people follow these 100%? No. Are these well enforced? No. But we do have them. And this kind of stuff does put a dent in the spread of viruses like Ebola. One person might get sick, but they're not going to spread it to everyone they know.
We actually have a different problem in which we're so sanitized, we're actually breeding superbugs, like MRSA.
Right, so...
But that's a different show.
If a countrywide pandemic arises that kills us all, it won't be Ebola. That's kind of the...
Be more worried about MRSA, actually. But that's a different problem. Antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria, that's our real enemy right now.
Now, I think it's very interesting what Joe brought up, actually, about first world problems and our desire to kind of own hysteria and to take other problems and make them our own problems. Like, for example, a completely unrelated story, seemingly, but yesterday, just out hanging out in a coffee shop here in San Diego, and I almost saw two guys, I shit you not, get in a fight over a pile of dog shit.
I saw this on Facebook, and I'm endlessly curious.
One guy's dog took a shit, and he started to walk away with the dog. Another guy comes up and yells at them, top of his lungs, very aggressive and very threateningly, "You're going to handle that, bro?"
And to start any argument with bro, that's a good start.
This is very polite, very
even though I don't disagree with that guy's point.
No, again,
but Jesus.
Your dog takes a shit, it's on you to clean it up, but you have to give people the benefit of the doubt. You can't just come off as an asshole and expect they're going to be courteous and civil and correct their mistake in return. That doesn't tend to end well.
You kind of went to ass right away and didn't,
Right.
Didn't
so the other guy, and these are big dudes, 6 foot plus, these guys, I wanted to see.
It's like a couple bull elephants fighting, and so you can't turn the channel on National Geographic.
Guy turns around, the guy with the dog turns around. I want to see how
this turns out.
And that's pretty much, that was everyone else's outlook. Other guy with the dog turns around and says, "Yeah, bro. I mean, you want to let me get inside and get something to clean it up? I'm not going to do it with my bare hands." And he walks, I don't know if he lives there or works there, but he walks inside one of the buildings next to this place, and then the other guy stands up and stands over the pile of dog shit, warning people not to step in it. So he's playing Mr. Concerned Neighbor. And it's like, dude, you're just looking for an outlet for your infantile aggression. Your mother didn't give you enough attention as a kid. He didn't have a chick with him. Maybe he's trying to pick one up. I don't know. But this is how we
now that I think about it, I don't think you can pick up chicks by being Lord of the Dog shit. But I could be wrong.
No, you're being the knight in shining armor that protects her from stepping in dog shit. Right, exactly. But see,
and then a nickel will get you a nickel.
The guy comes out. I won't even get you a coffee now. Not at this coffee shop. Guy comes out. Actually comes back. I was shocked. 5 minutes later, with a bag, cleans up the dog shit. And now the guy that called him out, I guess he realizes, wow, that was a little over the top. I kind of got a little aggressive with him there. He's trying to talk to him and be his friend and ask him about his dog. And the guy just completely ignores him. Picks up the dog shit, throws it in.
Hey man, this is one of our streets. You understand, right?
He wasn't doing that, though. He was just trying to be his friend by talking about unrelated topics like...
hey, how about them Chargers this year, huh?
Yeah. They sucked. So do you go fuck yourself.
It's San Diego. Sorry, I had to do that. Go Saints.
So anyway. The guy doesn't say anything in return. The guy with the dog cleans up the dog shit, throws it away, gives the guy a dirty look, and walks off. And I'm like, did I really just see two guys almost go to fists over dog shit?
Or at least you saw one asshole just couldn't help himself but be an asshole.
But the other guy was pretty aggressive in return, too. At first he was actively aggressive, then he was passive-aggressive. Mm-hmm. Neither of them really decided to be the bigger person. So what I see with that as a sociologist, as someone that likes to observe human behavior, is that we really don't have a lot of problems as Americans. We think we do. But we don't. Our problems, it's like that meme, first world
That
problems,
guy
third world
stopped
problems.
his life to guard dog shit.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Yeah.
He had nothing better to do. He was so plentiful in his needs, cared for, fed, clothed, housed. Where you got people like
$4 coffee in hand.
Where there's people in this country that would use that piece of dog shit as a pillow because that's where they have to sleep that night. Yet this is his mission in life. He's got time to guard the dog shit.
I would imagine in
We've reached
Lagos,
the pinnacle.
Nigeria, they don't do that.
We've reached the pinnacle, America.
I would imagine.
Yeah, you're talking a city where the gutters of the streets are the sewer, so dog shit would be the least of their problems.
Yeah, human shit would be more.
It would be right at home over there. Yeah.
I would imagine in Lagos, Nigeria, men of that age have higher priority concerns than some guy's dog shit.
I like Louis C.K. He was always like, people in other countries have way more serious problems. Like, they're chopping everyone's heads off today. I guess,
which in Nigeria is not far from the truth because Boko Haram and all that. And again, what happens in this environment is you have counter forces. So Boko Haram is one counter force. No way I'm advocating for them, but this is what happens. You have a complete breakdown in law and order, complete breakdown in the local culture, complete breakdown in infrastructure. So these animals start running around cutting off people's heads, hiding behind Islam. No, you're just looking for an outlet for your infantile aggression. It's nothing else. You couldn't make it as a day laborer for British oil. So you decided you're going to go chop heads. That's all there is. It's pathetic. People who are ideological and working for a political cause don't kidnap adolescent girls. That's not cute. So
I don't know what they're accomplishing doing that besides
waving their dicks in the world's face.
Basically.
It's not. Put it back in your pants. She didn't like it because it was too small.
I do want to address one thing. Just a special shout out to the Fox News argument. You gotta love Fox News, how predictable they are. Now, apparently, there's the Fox News version of this.
Almost as entertaining as watching guys fight over dog shit.
There's the Fox News version of this, and then there's the Alex Jones kind of slice of this, which even goes even further off the rails. But the Fox News one is it sounds like the anti-immigrant stuff we were talking about in the last show. Why are they bringing people with Ebola back here? Because they're Americans? It's not like they're acting like we're importing just the population of Sierra Leone over here or something. But then the Alex Jones one is like, he's intentionally doing that to start a pandemic here because reasons. I don't even remember what they were, but you know that Obama's always a step ahead.
Reasons? What happened?
Well, you may not have had any. Maybe I'm giving too much credit.
I've actually seen memes and like social media published stuff. This is really stupid. This is not from reliable sources. I'm not going to advocate for them by naming them, saying that these Central American kids are now bringing Ebola. Someone failed geography in middle school.
Really, they're. It seems like these people, and this proves what we were saying earlier about hysteria and how it's just keywords that just set people off. Ebola. They're not even keeping the stories separated in their head. They're just going into this blender in their mind. Just Ebola, immigrants, like you were saying, just shouting out words. Violence, war, pestilence, disease, people shitting blood. It's just all the same. It's all the same. Before they had mites and scabies, and now they have Ebola. I mean, it's just like, what are they going to have next week? You know what I mean? Yeah, someone's going to have a food poisoning claim against Taco Bell, and before you know it, those little kids, they must have all got jobs at Taco Bell. And give that person
Taco
Ebola
Bell's
from the Taco
Mexican
Bell.
food, remember? So they're bringing it from Guatemala. No, Taco Bell's not in Mexico.
Yeah.
But see, the other thing is when people are hysterical and they hear this shit and they hear these jolts, they believe what they want to believe, what they're already prejudiced and predisposed to believe. So if they're already predisposed against illegal immigration or whatever else, then of course they're going to attach Ebola to these kids, even though they're coming from. You can't possibly get any further from West Africa than Central America. It's just look at a fucking map of the world.
Bad thing. You know what I always think of as Brick Tamland? I don't know what we're talking about. Yeah.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah.
It almost seems like that when I hear these idiots.
And if you actually subject yourself to the torture of watching Alex Jones, I can't do it. I'm going to go out there right now and say, I cannot do it. I cannot watch that.
And I'm sorry, fans, if you're pissed off at us for confessing this to you, but no.
No, absolutely.
The guy whose idea of radio is literally just going, yeah. We're not about that on this show.
Yeah, we're not here to advocate hysteria. We're here to be
He's gone so far to that loud noises, he's literally just making noises.
and twitching and gesticulating as he does it. Right.
You ever watch like his videos when he's talking?
No, Joe, I already told you I can't do it.
Like
Right. So it's essentially what you're describing.
He looks like a mental patient.
Oh,
yeah.
he
is. And he sounds like one too.
Okay. But
Gee, not a coincidence.
looking at him, it's just he's the pinnacle of that. He is that basically gone to its logical conclusion, believing what you want to believe, cherry picking facts, completely forgetting analysis, and just hysterically presenting these facts to drive other people to believe what you want them to believe or what they want to believe. And now you have tinfoil hat nuts saying he's the plant, he's the conspiracy.
No, wow, I saw that. Yes.
Come on.
We're so through the looking glass of nut bar at this point. Yeah.
Right. It's like I'm stuck in a psych ward and I don't know who's the doctor and who's the patient. It's just that's what this world is turning into. And I contend that's a good thing. I contend we're on our way to something better. It's just this is the transition. This is the death of that basically oligopoly of lies that were at least consistent, and they were lies, but they were somewhat believable. And now people have stopped believing that, so they'll believe in anything. That's what we're coming down to.
And I think that's a good time to turn to Israel and Gaza. Now,
talk about the boiling point, the crux of human hysteria and human stupidity. Take one look at Palestine and Israel.
Now, our people who are fans probably already read Toxin's long write-up on this conflict. If you haven't, head over to our page and take a look. EduChaospodcast.com. We're going to basically...
the zero-state solution.
We're going to skip over, like, re-explaining all of that because it's all there in writing and it's written better there than we could ever sum it up here. So
yes.
Just... that's the 101 of this discussion. We're now in the 102 class here. So those who read it, you got extra credit. Those who don't, you got homework to do. But building off of that, this is my problem with this conflict. And I have several friends that have gone to Israel. I have another friend that has gone to Israel. He's Jewish. My other friend's Jewish. I've talked to them, and admittedly, so I've only been able to talk to Jewish people about this problem. I haven't been able to get the Palestinian side of this, only from media, and obviously that we'll get to that problem. The problem for me is a lot of people come to this crisis, let's say this conflict, with they've already picked a side and they're sticking with it. And so damned if any fact gets in the way of their dog in the fight, let's say. So if you're pro-Israel, the Gazans are nothing more than dogs or rats, depending on who you're talking to. And they basically, all 1.8 million of them in Gaza, all exist to fire rockets at you.
They're all Hamas. It's all just Hamas. Yeah.
And if you could speak honestly, you would basically be okay with just wiping that whole little section off the face of the earth and turning it into the newest beachfront resort in Israel. Now, that's the extreme version of that. Not everyone believes that, and if you ask a lot of Israelis, a lot of them actually oppose, not the majority. And the majority, I think, support the current operation in Gaza and all the past ones.
I don't know. I haven't seen any statistics on that.
It
what I
seems like
do
it's
know
split.
is that Israelis at least tend to understand their own situation, and they may be against Hamas, and they may even be against Gaza, and they may not have a favorable view of Palestinians, but it's their government, so they may actually oppose the actions of their government and think they're unreasonable. Like, for example, when we talk about the U.S. versus the Taliban here, now, I'm not siding with the Taliban when I say both Bush Jr. and Obama are fucking morons, and their policies have made things worse. So when you talk to an Israeli, they tend to understand the political situation and think their own politicians, at least a lot of them, think their own politicians are idiots for how they're handling this, even if they're absolutely patriotic Israelis
Right.
and they're against Hamas. And a lot of Palestinians, I have actually met several Palestinians and people that are pro-Palestine, and a lot of them, at least the ones from there, tend to understand that Hamas is a problem for them because it keeps poking at this bear, and then the bear bites them.
Right.
So they're not, most Palestinians are not fans of Islamic fundamentalists that want to blow shit up because they understand that's going to bring Israeli tanks into their streets, and that tends not to be a viable, a desirable outcome.
And that's the problem with me. I don't want tanks in anybody's streets, and I don't want anyone's civilians dying on either side. But that's just me. I'm a pacifist by nature. I don't like war. I don't like people being shot and killed. I just don't. It doesn't matter who's shooting, who's killing. I don't like it. So, it seems like when you express let's call it concern for the fact that and this is just the last count I read. It was like 1,900, I think, dead Palestinians, with somewhere around, Israel says, 900 dead militants. Now, if you be charitable about that, that means for every militant they killed, there was a child standing behind them that got shot too.
Not a child.
Not a child.
Civilian, but yes.
So that's a pretty bad batting average, let's just say that.
Honestly,
1 for 1. But
okay.
being against innocents being killed, it seems like a lot of people, especially Fox News types and the hard right-wingers and evangelicals, it's akin to saying you're pro-Hamas. I'm not pro-Hamas, okay? It's not okay. Again, I don't want anyone blowing anyone up or firing rockets at anybody's house. No one at all on either side.
Tanks do not belong in city streets.
No, this is why
they're not paved for that.
That's why I'm pissed about it when cops do it here. I don't like any tanks in any streets firing at anybody. So I'm not pro-Hamas, but I do think that a lot of times pro-Israel people, just like with pro-American people, they overlook and just gloss over or flat out ignore the times where civilians have paid the price for their policy decisions. Look at what how many Iraqis did we kill?
Oh, yeah.
And people bring it up, oh, we had to do it. It was the war we had to have. Really? We're stuff for the looking glass. So now not only was the war legitimate, which it completely wasn't, but it's okay that, 100,000 Iraqis were
Nobody
killed?
knows. Really,
it was a lot of Iraqis, though.
There's just not.
All the numbers that were thrown out, I think, were like six figures of people that were killed. And it's like, really? Would they agree with you? Would their family agree with you that it was worth it? And just saying it wasn't didn't mean they liked it under Saddam.
Take a look at Iraq now and tell me how well that's working for them,
because
what we did for them.
It was good because we established a lasting democracy. Oh, shit.
Someone forgot to tell ISIS about
it. So it's like, the audacity of these morons saying shit like that. Oh, it was totally okay because we liberated a country from a dictator, and blah, 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 as fucking ISIS is like murdering people in the street meantime. And let's not get into a debate about that because I don't want to. Yeah, obviously, that's going on right now.
Leave Iraq for a different
That's a different show.
But
it's just, there's so much just rhetoric, and it just gets in the way of actual facts.
Well, it goes right into what you said earlier, Joe, about Americans wanting to make others' problems our problems. Now, Americans also, and I hate to say this, I'm a very patriotic American, but Americans excel at ignorance. We're pretty far away from the rest of the world. We're a big place.
We're very kind of closed off in a lot of ways.
If you look at statistics for how many Americans have traveled outside the U.S. versus like countries in Europe or in Latin America or in Africa, very few of us have, statistically speaking. We don't know what the rest of the world looks like.
I'll be honest, I haven't.
For how many Americans speak a different language other than English? We're not worldly people. We're very diverse here in the U.S., but we're not really cosmopolitan. So because of this, we really don't have a very great understanding of what's going on outside our borders. We don't have a very good knowledge of history. Our social science education here is not the strongest in the world. So between those two things, we see pictures of dead children on TV. We see them on memes, and whether it's Israel or we hear about rockets falling in people's neighborhoods. And the hysteria baiting is there. We don't have anything else to worry about. We're people who want to get in fights over dog shit. Right? Well, this comes together. So you say, oh my God, they're killing those poor children. And people who are basically propaganda whores, who want to mislead you in one direction or the other, because there are very strong political lobbies in this country that are both pro-Israel and pro-Palestine, and they have a lot to gain. There's a lot of political gain to be had by continuing to throw fuel on that conflict. And if you want to understand why, I suggest you read my editorial. I'm not going to go into it here. So putting two and two together, there are people who understand that in order to keep fueling this fire, you have to fuel that hysteria. So if you take a picture of a dead baby, and I've seen this, it's like now I've taken a policy. You post a picture of a dead infant, I unfriend you. I block you. Because I do not want to see pictures of dead babies in my Facebook feed.
Yeah, I don't like seeing that when the anti-abortion people do it or anything.
Because that, to me, is just, you're trying to bait my emotions. You're trying to bait my hysteria. You're hoping I don't even read the article that's attached.
The purpose is extremely clear. I remember once, I don't know if I was with you, but we left our high school and there was some idiot standing on the corner with, blown up pictures of dead fetuses. And it's like, I instantly hated them, even though I couldn't clarify my argument against it. It's emotion baiting.
Right.
It is.
You're trying to bait my emotions so you can reel me into your side, and I will go over there and I will argue with you and I will stomp you into the ground, explain that you have no argument, and that's why you're out here. You're too batshit stupid to make a case, so you're just hoping to win over weak-minded people with pictures of dead babies. Get out. fuck off
It's
my
starting
campus.
a debate on a completely dishonest plane. Yeah,
Yes.
completely.
So,
Intellectually
with
speaking.
this, I have seen the photographs of dead children that do not come from Israel. I am sorry. You look at this, and you say, okay, that's not in Israel. And that's not now. That's in the 90s. But you're presenting this as a picture of a dead Palestinian child that's been killed in an airstrike. Now, are there Palestinian children who have been killed in airstrikes? Absolutely. But if you're that fucking stupid, I don't want to talk to you. And you point this out and say, look, here's where this picture came from. Look in the background. That's not in Israel. That's not in Palestine. And what do? Oh, you're a Zionist pig and you're racist and you want to wipe all the Palestinians off. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to be stuck here for the next hour arguing you into the ground so you don't mislead anyone else because you're that moron. And this definitely goes in both directions. Now, when it comes to my Israeli friends, when this first started, I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine who's Israeli. When it was in the West Bank, when it wasn't even in Gaza yet, when they kidnapped those 3 teenagers, and Netanyahu's brilliant response was to call in his reservists and bring tens of thousands of troops into the West Bank. This is not Gaza. This is the West Bank, and the West Bank and Israel. Probably this is a record of how long the two of them have been getting along.
Let's just call Netanyahu what he really is. By the way, the W of Israel. Anyway,
10 times worse.
Anyway,
here, they're. The West Bank and Israel don't necessarily like each other, but they're getting along. They're solving their problems via democratic means. It's this amazing thing that happens.
I'd forgotten, by the way, how big the West Bank is. I was looking at a map and I'm like,
wow,
I forgot how big it was.
It's not a small place.
Anyway.
So
it's like the size of Israel.
Getting along, but of course, there's still kind of a lot of hostility. But it's finally turning into political hostility. Like think Republicans versus Democrats, as opposed to U.S. versus the Taliban.
Anthony Bourdain was there not long ago.
Just
to put it that way, in American
terms.
West
Bank. The West Bank is very, it's a friendly.
He went to
place.
Gaza too,
right.
but that was considerably harder to get into.
The thing is this: the Palestinians in the West Bank are finally, most of them, starting to recognize that the Israeli government may be a bunch of idiots, but so is their government. Yeah, I said it.
See, that's something we have in common here,
right.
too. We can all come together.
Yes.
All the world over. Aren't your government idiots? Yes, ours are, too. Imagine
right.
that.
Okay. And that every Israeli is not their enemy. And I feel like Israelis have known this about Palestinians in general for a while. It's more Americans that support Israel that think all Palestinians are terrorists. Israelis don't think that way, most of them. So they were starting to finally come together and seek, political consensus. Consensus does not mean I'm your friend. And then this happens, and Netanyahu wants to bring tanks and bring the military into the West Bank. Well, what's that going to do to younger generations that don't even remember bombings? They don't remember.
Which, not to mention the teenagers, it had to do with a Hamas splinter group, not even the West Bank itself.
Well, right. Hamas, I guess, got into West Bank. I'm not exactly sure what happened. And what I told my friend when this was going on, before the airstrikes, before the rockets, I said, look, Netanyahu is trying to intimidate the government of the West Bank to get them to disown Hamas, because what happened right before that is they reconciled their relationship with Hamas. So he's using it. It's not okay to kidnap these teenagers. They needed to catch to kill the people who did it. No problem with them. Hang them by the balls in public. I'll be fine with that. But you cannot get in there and blanketly bring tanks into the streets of the West Bank in order to solve this problem, because you're perpetuating it. You're encouraging more people to behave this way because you're making them hate you. And lo and behold, he did that. Hamas started firing rockets, and now they went into the Gaza. So, and, what I get from a lot of especially older Israelis, and I remember a lot of Israelis they trace their origins back to the Soviet Union, not necessarily Russia, but Soviet expatriates. So they speak Russian. I can communicate with them. They have this kind of very neocon mentality, just like a lot of older Russians here in the U.S. And they can it's basically the same thing that you said. Oh, these Gaza animals, and you're not pro-Israel. No. I don't have to like Netanyahu and his policies to be pro-Israel, any more than I have to like Obama or George Bush and his policies to be pro-U.S. Like, is that really so difficult to understand?
It's like, how can you hate Obama, claim you love America, and then say that I can hate... Yeah.
Yes. That just doesn't work.
Maybe, in fact, hating Netanyahu is the most pro-Israel thing you can do, depending on your perspective of things. Imagine that. Yeah. And let's not forget why that whole truce thing didn't work out, John Kerry. Anyway.
Oh, God.
And speaking of which, any ceasefire that happened, who was negotiating those? Egypt.
And that, when I saw that, I couldn't believe.
Not America. Not
really?
to say, not to say that America needs to be the one negotiating all the ceasefires. Hey, if they're getting any kind of ceasefire out of them, great. Because no one's had any lasting success in that arena in a long, long time. Not Clinton, not Carter. So give them credit where credit is due.
The Romans, not the ancient Greeks. This has been going on for a while.
That guy, he can't even get a meeting anymore with these people.
Why? And they're like, John, why?
Weren't all these leaks that came out that basically, one of the ministers, I think, of some Israeli cabinet minister basically shit all over Kerry, and he ended up having to apologize about it, but basically was saying things like, oh, it's all about him, he just seems to want to just solve it just because for his own glory. Gee, does that sound like Kerry?
That doesn't sound like our John Kerry.
That sounds like all evil to me.
Yeah, he could never have done such a thing.
No, that doesn't sound like him at all. And basically Netanyahu, saying, don't ever second guess me again, and shitting all over him. Gee, who's surprised by that? But not to say that America needs to fix this, but then again, America is contributing because why? Congress can't do shit, but they did agree to send them more weapons to keep, but it's supposed to be with their Iron Dome to protect against rockets, fine. But, it's just, I have concerns, that's all. They say they're destroying tunnels, and yet entire city blocks are destroyed in Gaza. It's just a problem.
Now,
it's a problem.
Let's talk about this a little bit more about some of the developments since I wrote the editorial. Because again, the editorial is more about the history and what's going on. It's not really the existing conflict, and I make that very clear. So first of all, let's talk about Egypt. And I cannot believe that Egypt is being involved in this again. Now, of course, the modern Egyptian government is just a military dictatorship that, in order to stay in power, when it took power and it removed Mohammed Morsi, who, he was a scumbag and he wasn't doing a good job and he's affiliated with the Islamic Brotherhood and not a big fan of his, but they took him down when he was the elected president. Let's just leave that out there. And after this, they basically broke out the 30mm cannons on their own protesters, took out about 5,000 people in a massacre before everyone got the message, okay, the military coup is in power and you're not. Now, in Egypt, this is just standard. This is what happens. That's how Nasser came to power. That's how Sadat came to power. That's how Mubarak came to power. It's just the LCC is just the next step in that, in that ladder. But I love how, about a year and a half ago when this was going on, everyone, their only friend they had left in the world that was Saudi Arabia, who funded this because the Islamic Brotherhood is such a threat to the Saudi monarchy. Everyone else, including Israel, including the U.S., was saying, no, these guys are toxic. They massacred 5,000 of their own people, just to stay in power, for peaceful protesting, for saying we do not agree with the coup. We cannot have relations with them. We cannot touch them. And I'm like, okay, good. We're finally figuring this out. And now, it's been a year. Okay, they're off probation. You come out of the corner. You're now a world leader.
I guess this is the diplomatic...
Are you fucking shitting me?
This is the diplomatic equivalent of football player Ray Rice getting a 2-game suspension for beating the shit out of his fiancée until she was unconscious. And some guy smoking pot
he didn't kill her, so yeah.
Some guy smoking pot got 4 games. Everyone's like, wait a minute, what? Beating women 2 games, smoking pot 4. Let's wait a minute here. Yeah, but I guess it's the same idea.
It's mind-boggling.
Reflects very badly.
Of course, the Egyptian dictatorship has used this very effectively to basically wiggle its way back into the global community, saying, hey, Egypt has fixed, meaning caused negotiated ceasefires between the Palestinians and the Israelis in the past. We're gonna do it again. This is how we're gonna make you like us. No, these guys are murderers. These guys are war criminals. They unleashed their military on their own unarmed citizens. They belong at the end of a rope. That doesn't change because you make it a year.
Yeah.
And Mubarak did the same thing. He was guilty of it, and this is one of the reasons I despise Hillary Clinton, is because she supported him until his last day in office. Despite, you can't just pretend this isn't happening. You can't just pretend these guys are legitimate leaders that are not criminals, that have not murdered thousands of people, because they're convenient for you politically.
It was just funny because you talk about the neocon thing. Hannity was like, Obama didn't support Mubarak, our key ally in Egypt. Wow. That's all you need to know, right?
That's
Hillary and Hannity. And they hate each other otherwise, but they agreed. Mubarak, that dictator asshole, but he's a useful dictator asshole.
Our dictator
He's our dictator asshole, yeah.
And then you have liberals, okay, I love this, that want to support Hillary, talking about, they want to talk about Republicans, how, they cause war and they want to kill. It's like, Hello, excuse me. What fucking planet are you living on? Are you just it's just selective
Hillary, John
obtuseness.
Kerry, they voted for the Iraq War too.
Oh, and Kerry, now we have Kerry, and now Kerry's holding hands with El-Sisi. Now the thing is, the other interesting thing about Egypt is, of course, who's representing Hamas in these negotiations? The Muslim Brotherhood, who is now a banned terrorist organization in Egypt. I don't really understand. I've kind of had this impression that if you're a banned terrorist organization, you're not going to walk into a negotiating chamber with the government that has banned you to represent another terrorist organization in a foreign country.
Well, you're not Egypt, so...
Right, so it's a clusterfuck.
Yeah.
And my job here, this is why I'm neurotoxin, is to point out to you how ridiculous all these people are. You cannot trust them. You cannot trust Hamas. You cannot trust the Israeli government. You cannot trust the Egyptian government. You cannot trust the Muslim Brotherhood. And John Kerry won't even talk about trusting him.
As much as I have to acknowledge that my queasiness at dead kids and wrecked apartment blocks, I mean, we look at it from a very American perspective where it's not normal for that to happen in our city. That's
Third
why,
world problems.
That's why 9/11 was such a scarring thing on us. And look what we've done since then. I mean, Jesus, we're still on the rebound from that shit.
We went and instilled that of half the countries in the world, hoping it will not happen. But a few. Right.
But so I have to admit that, yeah, I mean, I don't like it. I want it to stop, but I realize the reality of, well, you know what? If people are going to blow each other up, they're going to blow each other up as much as I can have my objections to it.
Here's the thing I wanted to mention about something you said earlier about their batting average. Honestly, now, I don't necessarily believe those numbers. I think they're exaggerated.
That's the thing. We don't know who to trust even in the numbers. Because, of course, the Palestinian ministry is going to report really high numbers. And, of course,
Everyone
Israel
that's dead as a child,
is going to report really low ones. So it's like... And then the whole notion of they're using them as human shields, and Gaza wants, or Hamas wants, a high body count of civilians because they want Israel to look bad.
I mean, there's
I don't know.
elements
There's
of
nuggets
truth
of
to this,
truth
but
to
everyone
that.
exaggerates.
But it doesn't excuse, like there were things like there was a bunch of reporters that tweeted on a beach where Israelis like targeted a bunch of kids playing soccer and blew them up, like fired rounds at them, 2 of them. And it's like, this was like on the ground stuff that happened, but
they were claiming there's a rocket launcher right there.
It was quickly
and
squelched.
they encouraged them to play soccer. Again, it's very,
so hard to know the context of any of this shit.
But what I do want to point out, Joe, is even taking I'm taking, I guess, a middle ground between Palestinian numbers and Israeli numbers, that batting average is still much better than, let's say, for example, the United States.
Oh, okay? Well, if you compare 1,900 dead soldiers in like 78 years, or no, we had 4,000 something dead
and
soldiers.
How many Iraqis?
In like almost 10 years, and like 100,000 plus Iraqis, wasn't it?
But I'm talking about militants. Okay, let's talk about Yemen. If you read Jeremy Scahill's Dirty Wars, very much recommend that book. You drop a cluster bomb on a little remote village in Yemen to get one guy that's allegedly affiliated with Al-Qaeda.
Allegedly.
And you kill a couple of hundred people, Yemenis, in that. I mean, there is a batting average you can really be proud of. And then it's so toxic that you claim the Yemeni government did it. Wow. Where'd they get drones? Where'd they get cluster bombs? Come on.
Oh, it said U.S. on the side, but they painted them a different color.
Yeah.
So now they're not, right? Right.
Don't even get me started on Afghanistan, okay? Right. And that's the U.S. What about Syria? You know, Assad has killed more Palestinians than Israel.
You know what? That's true. I actually heard. I think the likes of Hannity even talking about that. Where are these liberals talking about Assad in Syria? Okay, you have a point about that.
Nobody
He's a
cares.
butcher, and he was our bad guy of the week for a while, but we've moved on.
Right, but when that was going on, there was a couple of times when the wars have overrun Palestinian camps in Syria, and actually the West Bank government was going apeshit. Like, they're saying, what the fuck? These camps are there. You invited these people. You built these camps for Palestinians in Syria, and now you're just slaughtering them because they're caught in the crossfire. They're going apeshit. Where's the outrage, CNN? Where are you? Yeah. Where are you? Where are the pictures of dead children?
It's true. It's true. We do pick sides.
What I do get, no, this is more than I think than a side, and this is something that's always frustrated me about the pro-Palestinian side. And it's the only way you could make a reasonable argument in favor of Hamas. So this is why I have to point this out. I have to grind this into the ground. Israel gets held to a completely different standard than the rest of the world. And I don't just mean different standard than Syria or Iraq or Yemen, because there you can at least make a case, okay, those are brutal militant dictatorships versus an elected government that's actually democratic. We're even talking a different standard than, say, the US or the UK or the EU. It gets held like, okay, for example, I got in an argument with some activists when I was going to grad school at San Diego State University who were trying to cite international law at me. And how Israel is breaking international law. So I asked these assholes a very inconvenient question. Name me one fucking country that follows international law.
Doesn't America as an official policy pretty much laugh in the direction of international law and then proceed to ignore it?
Nobody follows international law. Nobody. Not Iran, not the US, not Argentina or Brazil, nobody in the EU. Nobody follows.
They're a list of suggestions, aren't they?
Well,
that's how they're treated.
They're not laws if they can't be enforced.
That's how they're treated, yeah.
So, but these... And they're not pro-Palestine. These anti-Israel assholes will come out and count on your ignorance and your completely unfounded assumption that there's this magical set of international laws that everyone follows, and governments that don't follow them get reprimanded. Name one.
Who's the international cops?
Right. And they'll point out, oh, you see, Israel's breaking international law. Okay, now the reason for that is because you really don't have an anti-Israel argument. There are anti-Israel arguments. That's not one of them. The only real reasonable anti-Israel argument is that they're belligerent. That this tactic of dealing with Hamas is counterproductive. Okay? I'm not a supporter of Hamas at all. Hamas is a cancer. It's a criminal organization. There's no way around that. They're not freedom fighters. Okay, I don't care what your cause is. If you're launching rockets into civilian neighborhoods, you deserve to die. This is not. Think about it. If someone were
That's
launching,
one bit of truth that Fox says, if they were launching into your neighborhood, why would you?
It's true.
They would kill them.
If someone were launching rockets into my neighborhood here, and the U.S. government said
there were some guys in TJ with a fucking rocket launchers launching shit into Otay Mesa and San Ysidro, right. Believe me, we would roll tanks in there tomorrow.
Oh, very quickly, right? Yeah. Today,
smash that shit.
Right. But here's the thing. Okay, the problem here, and again, Israel is known for being more humane and for trying to warn people about their airstrikes and for trying to minimize the collateral damage. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying they do have a better batting average. And despite this, the propaganda tries to make them look like they're the most inhumane of all, when they're not. They're arguably the most humane as far as war goes in the world. But still, especially this particular administration, particularly Netanyahu, probably the sloppiest prime minister they've had in about 50 years. And he's intentionally that way. I feel like with him, he's so closely tied to defense contractors here in the U.S. who are now starving because we're so war-weary in this country, and that's their next best customer is Israel.
Oh, yeah.
And their military is as big as ours.
Which is really interesting
for
considering
a country of 8 million, yes.
That's country's the size of, like, Connecticut, isn't it?
Smaller.
It's like Delaware.
Well, no. Bigger than Connecticut. 8 million people. I'm not sure how many people are in those states. He's intentionally trying to stir this hornet's nest because the more aggressive Hamas is, the more of an excuse he has for his policies. Now, and
he was politically dead a few years ago when things were peaceful, wasn't he?
Now, his party and his whole coalition. Now, if we look at what happens in other countries, when you have presidents like George W. Bush or prime ministers like Tony Blair that are very into this same kind of policy, we're going to stir the pot, we're going to make things worse, and we're going to hope this is going to motivate people toward war.
And everyone gets paid in the meantime.
It's a very short-term thing. People start coming back missing limbs and caskets.
It's not a long game.
Yeah, it's really not. And then the people end up war-weary for 20 years, and then it's a net loss for the military.
And ask how hospitable Britons are when you mention the name Tony Blair.
Oh, yeah, they love him over there.
Their tabloids, by the way, have made it just their mission to just hound him in every job he takes afterward.
Him.
I think the latest one is he was doing consultation work where? Egypt. For the military dictatorship.
Hey, I'll see. How nice to see him.
Oh, well, he has strategic context. Yeah.
And torturing people.
He's a fucking asshole, and you know it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But here's the thing. In Israel, just as in Palestine, this kind of thing actually does work as a long game. Because the costs, this is what people a lot of times don't realize. The costs of this behavior, of these policies, really are not paid by the people living there. Particularly, this is true in Israel. If they're living in Gaza, they're kind of fucked anyway. They're either getting bombed, or they have this economic situation where they're just completely locked into Gaza and they can't get jobs. And Gaza, by the way, has 1.8 million people, and 40% of them are under the age of 14.
That's
so
a problem.
Where are they going to be working in about the next 10 years?
That's a real
just
problem.
Think about that. So
this is going to get worse.
They're kind of fucked anyway. In Israel, yeah, you have the rockets that kind of disrupts your life, but they're not dying. And one of the reasons we're so war-weary here in the U.S., although not everyone realizes, is because the effect of on the economy of the war. It's not just the dead soldiers coming back and the main soldiers. Well, that's a problem. It's also that war is expensive. It drives up the prices of raw materials, of food, of fuel, and then people can't afford it, and they lose their jobs, and it fucks up the economy. Like, nope, fuck that, we're not going there. In Israel, of course, do they pay for their own weapons?
Well,
do they pay for it? No. So
that's the one thing Mar was saying. Is like, can't they fight their own wars? And they have so much money that why do we support their wars?
Okay. Right. Well, they don't.
He wasn't saying they don't have a right to do it. He was saying, why are we financing
money? That's
it?
the thing. If you look between Israel and Palestine, the way to solve this problem is both the U.S., who funds Israel, and the forces that fund Hamas have to just agree to cut off their funding. Because that land cannot support that many people. It's the desert. It's arid. There will be nothing to eat. And they will be forced to get along.
Well, that was the one thing that derailed the latest ceasefire talks was that the Gazans want an end to the blockade. And it's like, well, the question is, what are these kids now, especially now that they've seen their fucking neighborhood blown up and parents killed or whatnot, right or wrong, if they now hate Israel and they're locked in a cage in essence? What kind of future they have? It looks pretty dark when you look at it that way.
It does, but it doesn't. Opening up
Is
Gaza,
cooperation better
I can
for the
understand.
long-term
Okay, but
future?
I can still understand the Israeli side of it. This is Mark Gold. I forget who he is in the Israeli government, but he was talking about why they can't just open up Gaza. Because one thing they want is they want their Mediterranean port open, which is currently blockaded by the Israeli Navy. Mm-hmm. But it's very difficult to control that port once it's open because of where it is. So you're going to have the Iranian government, which that's who does it. I said it. I don't give a shit if you're going to claim that they don't do this, because they do. You're going to be delivering large amounts of weapons through that port if you open it. And what Mark Gold said is a very, very rational argument. We do want we want the Gazans to rebuild their infrastructure, but we want to make sure that cement is going to build up buildings and not dig tunnels into Israel.
Well,
now,
their success of that has been not so good then.
Now, that tends to happen. People tend to want to dig tunnels to kill you when you've been holding them in a cage and occasionally bombing them.
That's the thing, right? Isn't this an endless cycle?
But at the same time, you can't just pretend that didn't happen. Okay, we're going to open your port, but you're going to be nice now. You're not going to dig tunnels. No, that doesn't work. So we have this is a bad situation. This is a conflict that, if you really read the history, dates back thousands of years. It's not just going to end because one side holds out a hand and says we're going to do a truce. The other side's going to bite that hand every time. And so when you talk about end of the blockade, Israel's whole strategy the entire time it's been the country of Israel, has been to keep itself defensible, to keep the Palestinians and everyone that's behind the Palestinians. There was a time when it was the USSR that was behind the Palestinians. Nasser in Egypt was behind the Palestinians. It's always been about keeping the Palestinians and the forces behind them from running Israel over, from just overrunning it, destroying it. And they've succeeded at that. So it is very much a short game. However, the real problem there is that Israel, the same place it gets its weapons, is where it gets its food, or where it gets the money and the economic resources to import its food, to import really its consumer goods. Because without the U.S. supporting it, it really will not be able to get either. So as soon as you start alienating the weapons contractors, start alienating your food. And for Hamas, it's exactly the same thing, only with Iran. So this is why this is one of the few places where these kind of policies, where we keep instigating each other, are actually beneficial to the governments that are enacting them, whereas in most places they would be very detrimental and short term. So when they talk about, I really don't see an end to this. Whatever agreement they come to, no one's going to follow. One thing I heard, this is a brilliant idea, let's open the Egyptian border crossing, because there's three ways into Gaza: Israel, Egypt, and the port. Let's open the Egyptian border crossing, and we'll have a UN mission there. That's who's going to control the border crossing. Are you fucking kidding me? What I say earlier about international law? I mean, really? Those idiots? This is whatever happens here. I can tell you. I don't know exactly how this will end, but I can tell you that any agreement that is reached will be breached within the next 4 or 5 years, and we're going to have another situation. It's exactly the same as this one.
The Yasser Arafat and Ehud Barak, Yitzhak Rabin shaking hands with Clinton. You had, Arafat again, and I forget who it was, back in the 70s, shaking hands with Carter.
Kissinger also was one that did it. Yeah, there have been so
and look where we are
many,
today.
And I actually mentioned this. It's these narcissistic foreign politicians from the USSR, from the US, from Britain say, "Oh, I've created peace in Israel," and Kerry just wants to be on the list of people who've done that.
Who tried and failed.
You can't even create. Everyone and their mother has created peace in Israel, but not Kerry. Kerry can't even do that. But the problem with that peace is a temporary ceasefire, and everyone in Israel and everyone in Palestine understands that. Talk to an Israeli about this. Talk to a Palestinian. They may have all sorts of odd ideas about who's right and who's wrong, but one thing they all agree on is this war is never going to end. We live in a war zone. It's like you said, it's as normal for them. We grew up in a war zone. It's always going to be a war zone. It's normal. For Israelis, most Israeli homes have a bomb shelter in the house. It's a little room that's a rocket could not penetrate. The sirens go off. It's like, oh, here come the sirens. We got to get in the room. It's like a tornado warning in the south.
I forget the name of the town. Like Hannity was in Israel all week saying Hannity things.
I'm so sorry, Israel.
I know. We apologize for that.
That clown there. Yeah, okay.
He interviewed the prime minister and even a bunch of secretaries. But he was talking about a city. It was like a mile from the Gazan border. And I'm sorry, I forget the name. It started with an S. That's all I can give you right now. But it was you could probably Google this and figure it out just based on. There was this giant textile factory that I think it was the JCN, I want to say was the organization. They turned it into an indoor playground because this area of the country, the kids can't play outdoors because of the bombs. Like there's so many rockets and it takes too long to run into the bomb shelter from outdoors. No one lets their kids go outside. So they're like, well, what if we built a giant reinforced building with an internal core that's safe from bombs that, okay, they can be in the outdoors, but their part of the building is only a few feet at any given time from a reinforced thing that's against bombs and rockets. And so when the sirens go off, they just walk a few feet, and there's stuff to do in there, too. They're not just cowering in a hole.
Right. Now, for Palestinians, a lot of them simply don't have the resources for that kind of thing. So when they're getting airstrikes...
And it took foreign donations. It was like they said a lot of their network, they have donors in America, Jewish people here that donated, and that's how it got done.
Normal for Israel. But in Palestine... they just don't have the resources. You hear a lot about, they're purposely putting their people out in front of the airstrikes.
Human shields. Yeah, that gets repeated a lot.
It's really, if you've seen, I haven't been to Gaza, but I've been where I could see Gaza. It's really way more simple than that. It's a very small, very
tiny and
crowded
dense
place.
Yeah.
It's not quite Lagos, Nigeria.
Where are they going to run?
But, right.
Yeah,
well, so
exactly.
Not only where are they going to run, but if I'm Hamas... when you say, you're putting your rocket launcher next to a school or hospital...
everything's next to a school or a hospital.
There's nowhere else to put the fucking rocket launcher.
Okay,
you know how we have these idiot sex offender laws to protect the children in California? Which sounds great until you draw up a map and realize there's nowhere for you to live.
Yeah, in Florida, they had this there was a spot under a bridge that everyone could live, and to the point where they were literally... It started as just one guy finding it. It's like, well, I can live here, so I guess I'm going to live here. And then like another dude ended up finding out the same thing on his own. Before you knew it, they were literally busing these guys straight from prison, dropping them off below the bridge.
And then built like a housing development there and a
they
school.
They were all living under the bridge.
Not school,
because they couldn't live anywhere else.
Right. So
yeah,
in Gaza, okay, now again, not apologizing, just not advocating for Hamas. Gaza is so densely populated and so small that if you're going to have an organization like Hamas that's going to shoot rockets over the border, or over the walls, they're going to be within the vicinity of children, of hospitals, of schools, of beaches. There's no way around this. Now, that being said, where does that leave the Israelis? What choice do you have? You can't just let these guys fire rockets. You can't just, no, that's cool. They're just firing rockets. It's just an occupational hazard living in Israel. It's like a tornado. In Nebraska,
the rockets are really out today.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't just have that attitude, that mentality toward it. You have to take out those. Now, how do you take out these rocket launchers? These guys, just like the Taliban, they don't wear uniforms. They don't wear. It's like anyone has Hamas tattooed on their forehead. Yeah. Right.
It's like Viet Cong in Vietnam.
Right.
Like, pick the Viet Cong out of a crowd of 30 guys.
They're all So
and it's probably gonna be the 5-year-old kid anyway. Sorry.
There's really only because that's who they give the grenade, because that's who you don't suspect, right?
Right, exactly.
So there's really only 2 ways. Well, there's 3, but 2 ways to deal with this in any quick fashion. One is just airstrikes. And IDF and Israel has very powerful intelligence resources. They're the Mossad, some of the best in the world. So they do know where the rocket launchers are. And they're actually, the last time there were airstrikes in Israel, there's actually records of them calling hospitals and calling public buildings and saying, hey, get the fuck out. We're going to level the building because there's a rocket launch. We have to take out this military target. Trying to minimize civilian casualties. Doesn't work 100%, but quantitatively, it's better than nothing. It's better than what we've done in Iraq. It's better than what we've done in Yemen. It's better than in Syria. Don't even get me started there.
World War II.
Well, that was a different era. It's a different comparison. I'm comparing to things that are going on in the modern world. So they do try, but again, if you're, airstrikes by their nature are not precise. It's not exactly surgery.
Even today, yeah.
Even with today's capacities. The other way you could do this is you run tanks into the streets and try to find these Hamas guys and drag them out by the balls and then lock them up. The problem with that is now that's even worse. You're ransacking entire neighborhoods in a very densely populated place. And all the little Palestinian children, 40% under 14 years old, those are the evil soldiers arresting my uncle, who may or may not be Hamas. Right? So now you're doing the Iraqi occupation thing. That does not endear you to the people there. Now, we also have to remember that in Gaza, the media is very closely controlled by Hamas. So they're constantly inundated with propaganda that Israel is of the devil. This is not the case in the West Bank. We're just talking about Gaza. So you see how this really is not an easy way out of this situation. So, in my opinion, when we talk about human shields, I think it's happened. I think there have been times where Hamas has intentionally placed their weapons and their military equipment next to schools and hospitals. More so, that criticism has been leveled against Hezbollah in Lebanon, because in Lebanon there's plenty of room to put your goddamn weapons away from the schools and the hospital, but then the IDF will come kill you and no one will give a shit.
It's another country that likes lobbing rockets across the border.
Right, but Hezbollah is a little different. In that country, like I said, you can afford to put them away from the hospitals and the schools. But if you do that, the IDF will come kill you and no one will care. So in there, those criticisms were legit. And now, people that are more pro-Israel are just trying to say, Hamas is doing something. Well, no, it's not the same organization. Hamas are not even necessarily Shia, whereas Hezbollah are. Hezbollah is openly tied to Syria and Iran. Hamas is not. So, no, this is not, they're tied, but they don't admit it. So this is not, you can't just say that because Hezbollah did it, that must be what Hamas is doing. Because that's stupid. They're not even really in the same place if you look at a map.
Yeah.
So, where I'm going with this is, I think, at the same time, claiming that Israelis are targeting schools, targeting hospitals, that's just plain stupid. Why would you do that? So the Hamas would have something would have propaganda to levy against you. Like, what's the end result? Like the idea that there's Zionists that want to torture them, and that's imbecilic. If they really wanted to do that, they just level all of Gaza and get it over with.
Assuming that without evidence is, it's disingenuous at best. Yeah.
This is a bad situation. It's a situation that sucks for everyone on the ground. And it sucks for the Israelis. It doesn't suck remotely as badly, but I wouldn't want rockets raining in my neighborhood.
I think it's so bad that they want to pick a side just so they can make sense of it. Because otherwise you can't. It's kind of almost a religious kind of thing to want to make sense of it.
With you entirely there, Joe. And this really goes for a lot of problems that we take on, whether it's dog shit or what is that? We have to acknowledge, as Americans,
it's a crazy world,
that the world is not perfect, and that especially with Israel and Gaza, we have to acknowledge that there really is not an easy solution. This is going to happen. People are going to die. Dogs are going to shit. There's going to be viruses and pandemics. We cannot make the world a place that doesn't have problems. And people, especially when they've been grown up, spoiled, and without really very serious problems that the rest of the world has in their lives, like many Americans, they have a very difficult time acknowledging that. It's challenging. It challenges their psychology of this nice puffy world with white picket fences, like you were talking about Murrieta.
We want to be the world to be suburbia, a nice orderly
white
place.
Suburbia.
with HOAs and no one can step out of line too far. Yeah. We're not used to the real world's problems.
When people see this, and it really kind of disrupts their perception of what the world should be, they become hysterical because they want a fast, easy solution. And there is no such thing. And Israel, I can tell you my prediction, probably my most confident prediction of all time. This crisis is not going away. There will continue to be conflict in that area for decades, perhaps centuries. I don't think either of us, Joe or I, are going to live to see the end of that conflict. The sides may change. It may not be Hamas versus the Israeli government anymore, but it will continue. It's always been there. It's not going to go away because John Kerry claims it went away. And when it comes to Ebola, there will be viruses. And there will be places in the third world that are taken over by foreign corporations and that create conditions that are conducive to viruses and to Islamic fundamentalist groups like the Taliban or Boko Haram. I'm not saying these aren't problems. I'm not saying there aren't things we can do about them. But the first thing we have to do is turn off the hysteria switch, because all you're doing is playing into it.
Basically. And there's lots of, and I would add an addendum to that there's vested interest in keeping the hysteria going, especially if you're someone who's selling weapons to somebody or someone who's selling miracle serum to somebody. Or there's always someone looking to pile on. Remember in 9/11 when building safety parachutes came out? It's just there's always some guy wanting to pounce on the latest craze. That was
building safety.
That was one of my favorite parts of Fahrenheit 9/11 when they showed one of these people trying to demonstrate their strap-on parachute, and they were saying how fast and easy it could get on in terms of a terrorist attack, and they couldn't get it on. That was my favorite part.
What a fail.
And the local news lady to her credit said, "So are you sure that you could actually do that when like shit's on fire and the building's about to collapse?" "Oh, sure, it's easy. You just how the fuck do you do this shit?" Like he couldn't get it on. It was like 5 minutes of talking. But yeah,
the guy who invented it couldn't get it on.
I guess my one like closeout thought would be, you know what, Americans have this like, and I have it myself. We have this like egotistical desire to want to fix everything, and we're told, and there's different people that tell us this in different ways. Fox News likes to tell it very explicitly. We're told that, well, America can fix anything. The minute we decide to fix it, and we've done this and that, the other thing, you know what, we can't fix everything. And I think the Rand Paul thing, like people like Hannity, they want to act like there's no problem America can't fix because we're just great. We're the best country ever was, ever will be, and there's nothing we can't do if we set our mind to it. That whole Reagan idea of we're the power in the world, we're not in decline, we're blah, blah, blah. You know what? We have finite resources, and we can't fix every problem. Or there's people like Rand Paul, it's one thing I agree with them. We can't be meddling in every single little thing. We can't. It's impossible.
We have plenty of problems here.
And it seems like the more we it seems like the more we try, the more we failed in those other places in the world because we don't understand the nuances, and we just fuck everything up even more. I only got to point to history to prove my point about that. And meanwhile, our infrastructure is crumbling, and we have rampant poverty and plenty of disease.
How many homeless veterans do we have?
Bad health. I mean, what was it that someone did for the Daily Show? There was this guy talking about how bad healthcare is in other countries, and he went with this organization that flies doctors into third world countries to help treat the local population. And where did they go? Knoxville, Tennessee. I mean, there's plenty of places in this country that are just fucked up, and we forget, like, there's areas of this country that are like the third world. They are poverty-stricken. They are, I mean, relatively.
I wouldn't go as far as the third world, but I'd
say
it's
further than
like
people
Mexico
would expect.
Or Eastern Europe. They're not quite Nigeria.
No.
But Mexico or Eastern Europe,
it's worse than a lot of American people realize it is in certain places in this country.
Right.
The South and Appalachia and upstate New York, there's areas that are just so chronically poverty-stricken.
Detroit.
The inner cities of Chicago, the inner cities of Baltimore. Baltimore's been fucked up for so long.
Right.
I mean, it was like fucked up when my dad was a kid in the 50s and 60s. It had problems.
Philadelphia, right? And
which actually they're on an upswing compared to Chicago right now.
Turn around, but here's the thing. We have these issues, and we may disagree on how to fix them. We talk about gun control and whatnot, but these are still problems. The murder rate in Chicago is a problem. Joe and I will disagree on how to fix it, but it's a problem. Okay, the veterans in this room. We want to talk about something that we all have consensus about. It's embarrassing how many homeless veterans living in poverty, suffering from mental illness we have. And I mean, the VA. What did they say? There was like 16,000 records that they found that they've.
It keeps getting worse.
It's definitely in 5 digits now. This is going on while we're worried about fixing Syria and Iraq. Why?
And as much as we talk about first world problems, we still have our share of problems.
Well, when I talk about first world problems, I'm really, like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head. We're talking about white suburbia.
Right.
People from there could travel 50 miles from their home, and they could see, wow, there's really plenty for me to work on in my own county. I don't need to worry about the poor kids in
They
Gaza.
don't usually go to the post side of town, and they've been eye-opening experience.
Right, you see Gaza on TV. You don't see the shit neighborhood in your own city on TV.
Right. Philadelphians go to Camden once in a while just to get a little eyeful there, just for example. People up in
Don't get out of your car, but just go take a look.
Like, how quickly do people who live in the northern suburbs of Detroit get the hell out of there once their plane hits the runway in Detroit International? And how fast do they speed through the interstate to get the fuck out of the city center?
Right.
Yeah.
So we do have problems. We have, like I said, not quite Nigeria, but we do have, let's say, second world problems, developing country problems. There's places in this country, and you can disagree on what should be done, but one thing that's obvious there is lack of resources, poor management of resources, poor resource distribution, and rather than trying to deal with that, our government is investing itself abroad, meddling in foreign countries we do not understand, and the media is basically making white suburban people in the U.S., or really just suburban people in this, it didn't have to be white, really, think that, they have a problem and we don't. So when you hear liberals talking about how, why are we bombing Iraq when our own healthcare is in the toilet? Well, they're right. They're citing a very real problem. Their solutions are just border on pink unicorns and sunshine coming out of their asses. But their problem they're citing is still very real, and I agree with them completely. We should not be investing in that. We should be investing in this, even though it's different from how they want to invest in it.
I guess that's a good note to wrap up on.
So I think we shit on a lot of people today. We shit on Hannity.
I feel kind of purged myself. Right. I don't know about you.
Right. But
sitting on Hannity is a sport for me.
Yeah, right.
Anyway,
Alex Jones. We shit on Tony Blair and George Bush. We shit on Obama. Yes. We shit on Hamas. We shit on Boko Haram. We shit on Netanyahu. We shit on
Kerry.
Kissinger. We always shit on Kerry. That guy is just sitting in my toilet.
It's just easy. Yeah.
Hillary. Okay. So we didn't get to Putin. We were thinking about possibly bringing Russia and Ukraine, but I think we've done enough on that. But the reality is, really, and I think this is where Joe and I do agree, the reality is the world will be a safer, more peaceful place when people have a more objective perspective of it. And they're not just prone to swallowing up propaganda because it fits a fantasy narrative that they've grown to like and that's grown to make them comfortable. And that's what we're here to do. That's why we're the edge of chaos. And if you're offended by this, well, tough shit. Because we are genuinely motivated by trying to create safety and trying to make the world a little more peaceful. We don't delude ourselves that we're going to stop all the problems in the world. But it's a quantitative deal. Are things getting better or worse? And the way we do it, our tactic of doing it, is trying to shut down and derail things that make the world worse and make the world more dangerous. So thank you for being with us. I'm Neurotoxin.
I'm Joe Ryan. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to The Edge of Chaos. We can be found on the internet at edgeofchaospodcast.com. That's edgeofchaospodcast.com. Contact the show, edgeofchaospodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at edgeofchaosshow. We can also be found on Facebook at facebook.com/The Edge of Chaos. Neurotoxin's blog can be found at neurotoxins with an S, FYG, at blogspot.com. My blog can be found at joeryansworld.blogspot.com. For Neurotoxin, this is Joe Ryan. Thank you for listening to The Edge of Chaos.
I don't understand anything, so there you go. You know my problem? I watch too much news, man. That's my problem. That's why I'm so depressed all the time. I figured it out. I watch too much CNN, man. I don't know if you've ever sat around and watched CNN longer than, say, 20 hours in one day. I don't recommend that. Watch CNN headline news for 1 hour. It's the most depressing thing you'll ever fucking do. War, famine, death, AIDS, homeless, recession, depression. War, famine, death, AIDS, homeless. Then you look out your window. Where's all this shit happening? Ted Turner's making this shit up, man. Jane Fonda won't sleep with him. He runs to a typewriter. By 1992, we will all die of AIDS. Read that on the air. I don't get laid. No one gets laid. I'm writing, Jane Fonda. Will you fuck this guy so we can get some good news, please? I want to see a well-laid Ted Turner newscast. Hey, it's all going to work out. Here's sports.